Our Way to a Wonderful Life message is titled, Imagination is Creation. Imagination is creation. And so we all understand and we know that God has given us this wonderful mind where we can analyze things and choose things and come to conclusions about ourselves so that we can avoid all that stuff that the world is creating that diminishes who we are and what we're about and what this life on planet Earth is supposed to be about. And so many times religions have used the word sin as a thing to bring people down or to diminish people or to judge people, but sin is just self-inflicted nonsense. Self-inflicted nonsense. Think about that. Think about all the things that are happening in our world. Think about all the things that go on in the world that are just happening because of self-inflicted nonsense, because people are not looking at life in the proper way. They're not looking at their relationship with God in the right way. They're not looking at this expression of life that we are in the right way. So it's our imagination that triggers that something within us to think of ourselves in a greater way, to think of the world in which we live in a greater way, so that we can begin to bring our heaven right here on earth. This, as Jesus tells us, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. I keep going through that phrase in my mind, thinking, why is it that so many people lack the awareness that God has already given us every wonderful and beautiful thing that we can imagine, but it's up to us to open our mind, our awareness, to see it, to receive it, to believe it, to accept it. The great Albert Einstein stated that knowledge is limited, imagination encircles the world. Knowledge is limited, but imagination encircles the world. And most of us are aware of this statement, even though those who do not realize the power of our imagination. Einstein draws upon our imagination to understand these words. Who but someone willing to imagine could understand the words encircles the world? With our imagination, we can enjoy the evening at a sidewalk cafe in Rome and still not leave where we are. We can enjoy wearing the finest of clothes without going shopping. In these imaginings, we are using our mind not in a sense of fantasy, but as a way to enlarge our capacity to be conscious of the abundance in the world. Often words are spoken from the imagination in order to get our attention. Jesus made use of this technique when he said, "Truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be taken up and cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says is going to happen, it will be granted him." Now, as we take his words into our mind and imagine it, and if you do, you have defied reason, and in turn, you have expanded your power of imagination. Because Jesus was teaching people to think outside of the limited world in which they found themselves. To think outside, to see beyond the physical, see beyond that which we have been taught to accept as real, to see beyond what the world has become aware of, and go beyond that worldly awareness into that spiritual awareness that where only God can bring into our mind. The great minister, teacher, Dr. Joseph Murphy, great author, wrote this about imagination. He said, the faculty of image-making is called imagination. It is one of the primal faculties of mind and has the power to project and clothe our ideas, giving them visibility on the screen of space. We can discipline, control, and direct our imagination constructively and get what we want in life, or we can use it negatively and imagine what we don't want in life. The mental images which we contemplate and consciously accept as true are impressed on our subconscious mind or soul and made manifest in our life. Imagination is the mighty instrument used by famous scientists, artists, poets, physicists, inventors, architects, and mystics. When the world says it is impossible, it can't be done, the person with vivid imagination says it is done. It is done. Just think about the Wright brothers trying to fly the airplane, and all the people, all the naysayers who were saying that it couldn't be done, and they were laughing and they were going on and just feeling this triumph in their mind of being right about how wrong the Wright brothers were every time they did a test run and that didn't take off. But eventually here we have these wonderful airplanes and jets and transporters, air transporters that take people across the world in a matter of hours. So each and every one of us know that whenever we think of anything beyond what is we can feel, hear, see, taste, and touch, that our imagination comes into play. Our imagination comes into play. But we won't find the goodness, the greatness, the joyfulness, the good life, and the wonderful life that's being prepared for us in the great beyond, and that which is in the great invisible, if we don't use our imagination. So we must trigger that something within us that opens our mind up to a greater image, a greater likeness of the good desires that we find in our heart. Just as Jesus was telling us, think about telling that mountain to be set into the sea, and just think about how ridiculous that must have sounded to the people of that time. But he was only using that as an illustration of how we can go beyond the seeming real of the world to the true reality of spiritual consciousness, and find that, develop and discover that Christ within us that can take us into all manner of amazing things and experiences in our life that's greater than anything we've experienced before. As Dr. Murphy tells us, imagination is one of the primal faculties of mind and has the power to project and clothe our ideas, giving them visibility on the screen of space. We can discipline, control, and direct our imagination constructively and get what we want in life. But, and here's the big but that goes with this. We have to be willing to come forth with the ideas. And where do the ideas come from? Every good idea comes from God, from the great, infinite, invisible power, presence, and spirit that moves through our mind, our heart, and our soul to bring us those thoughts that we think, those desires of our heart, to bring us all the things that are necessary for us to think beyond what is known. As the great Albert Einstein said, knowledge is limited. Knowledge only tells us what has been done before. Knowledge is limited. Imagination encircles the world. Imagination encircles the world. Now, the Barbados-born teacher Neville Goddard, taught that the imagination is our Christ within, that it is creative and powerful. I believe that our imagination can be very useful in stirring up the spirit within us and enabling us to transcend the conditions and circumstances that we want to move through, that we no longer feel comfortable with experiencing and we no longer want to experience. And for many of us, these conditions and circumstances have been the effects of our acceptance of the struggle and limitation that we have learned from the world. We are all influenced by the collective consciousness to some degree, but let us focus on potentials and possibilities. And we can do this with ease by understanding the creative power of the imagination. Think about it. Think about what you can do with your imagination. See yourself. Use it. If we don't use it, then we lose it. If we don't use it, we can't expand it. If we don't use it, we can't enlarge it. If we don't use it, we can't grow in our ability to make it more and more effective in our life. Think about what you're doing. Think about what you're thinking about experiencing. What is it you want to experience? What is it that you want to receive from the universe that will give you that something that gives you that greater feeling of enthusiasm for life? Because we must have enthusiasm for life. Just as Jesus tells us to love God with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our mind, to love God means to love life, for God is life. To love God is to love this creation of God that we call planet Earth, and to realize that there's something within us that can make our best better in all areas of our life if we just go within and discover that same Christ within us that Jesus was teaching everyone to discover within themselves, and we can begin by heightening our awareness of the power of our imagination. Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher considered a central figure in modern philosophy, said, "Happiness is not an ideal of reason, but of imagination." Happiness is not an ideal of reason, but of imagination. And this opens us up to a new ideal for many of us, and that is to express the nature of God more in our life through the use of our imagination. We know that the nature of God is livingness and givingness and forgivingness, and we use our imagination to imitate the nature of God. We can find that by doing so, we stir up the spirit within us and begin attracting to ourselves that good and more good that is ours to receive. We can use our imagination to give to others those things that we desire for ourselves. That is, to give them money, to give them cars, to give them vacations, give them whatever it is that we desire for ourselves. And as we make it so vivid in our mind that we almost feel like it is true, then we shall be more in tune with the infinite in a greater way. And in the doing of this, our mind is stayed on the good, stayed on God, and this can only draw more and more good into our own life in amazing ways. And as we express through our imagination more of the nature of God, then we shall find ourselves confident of even more power, more love, and more joy in our own personal life. But think about those things. Think about all that we can imagine for ourselves, all that we can feel within our heart, our mind, and our soul that we can choose to experience for ourselves that takes us out of that feeling of being limited in whatever way limitation comes to us. We must bring into our mind, our heart, and our soul this greater ideal of just allowing ourselves to feel the goodness, feel the love, feel the joy, feel all those things that are moving through our mind, our heart, and our soul that give us that feeling of being alive to life, that feeling of feeling the joy of life, and accepting within ourselves this greater capacity to empower ourselves from within our own heart, our own mind, and our own soul, to receive those good things that we accept for ourselves. We must believe in order to receive. We can receive without believing. Believe me, I know it's true, but what we receive is always going to be conditioned on something outside of us. It's not going to be conditioned by our own consciousness that knows and knows that it knows that God, Infinite Spirit, is moving through our mind, our heart, and our soul, expecting us to realize the good desires of our heart because we have it available to us. We have it available to us as we make it so vivid in our mind that we do have all the good available to us, and start seeing ourselves experiencing it, feeling the joy of having it, feeling the vividness in our mind of what it looks like to feel happy, to feel peaceful, to feel the joy of just being alive, and see ourselves experiencing the livingness, the givingness, and the forgivingness of life in a greater way. That forgivingness means to give up all the old ideas, all the old stuff that separated us from God and from each other. That livingness means that we look forward to life every day. We get out of bed in the morning and we feel like this is a great new day. What is going to happen today? What am I going to do today that increases the joy in my life, the joy for other people? What am I going to do to increase my prosperity and the prosperity of those around me? How am I going to be functioning in this divine circulation of the livingness, the givingness, and the forgiveness of God moving through me? Because whatever God is going to do for us, God must do through us. That's the absolute truth. What God is going to do for us, God must do through us. And let's take that into our mind as the truth and accept it as the truth. And let's go back to those words of the great Dr. Joseph Murphy, the great teacher, minister, author. He says, the faculty of image making is called imagination. It is one of the primal faculties of mind and has the power to project and clothe our ideas giving them visibility on the screen of space. We can discipline, control, and direct our imagination constructively and get what we want in life, or we can use it negatively and imagine what we don't want in life. The mental images which we contemplate and consciously accept as true are impressed on our subconscious mind or soul and made manifest in our life. Imagination is the mighty instrument used by famous scientists, artists, poets, physicists, inventors, architects, and mystics. When the world says it is impossible, it can't be done, the person with vivid imagination says, it is done, it is done. So just think of Edison creating all those light bulbs, and think of the Wright brothers once again with their airplanes that would take off and then fall back to the ground, and then look up in the sky the next time you see a jet airplane flying overhead and realize just what that idea that entered the Wright brothers' mind. Or just think about how electricity lights so many things up. The other day there was a picture of the Eiffel Tower on the front pages of many newspapers because of this barbaric act of terrorism that happened in Paris, that was celebrating the fact that people were still hopeful and still praying for a greater peace and a greater coming together of all people to cease the nonsense and the ignorance of our feelings of separation from God and separation from each other. They lit it all up. Think about that idea of Edison with his little light bulb and how the effects of that idea have changed the world in which we live. The mastermind Jesus taught in parables because he was aware that these simple stories could arouse the imagination of those who listen to them. Once our imagination becomes alive with the images of good and wonderful experiences, we are realizing that life is more than just what we see with our physical eyes. So much of it, the most important aspects of life, are beyond the physical senses. This realization we must have to achieve the level of awareness to receive all the good that is ours to receive. Jesus declared, all that the Father hath is mine. All that the Father hath is mine. He told us the Father is Spirit, not a spirit, but Spirit omnipresent, everywhere present. Spirit, omnipotent, all power. Spirit, omniscient, all intelligent, and it's available to us. And as it is available to us, then we can choose and accept and receive and believe that we receive all the good desires of our heart. So all that the Father hath is mine, and just imagine that this is true for you too, because Jesus would tell you it is so, just let it be so. And so each and every one of us can take this idea of imagination, and we can either use it, or we can just go about our day thinking that all that we see in the physical, all that we can see, hear, feel, taste, and touch is all there is. And if we do, then we're going to be consumed in that self-inflicted nonsense of that limitation of knowledge. Knowledge is limited, Einstein tells us. Knowledge is limited. Imagination encircles the world. And so it is, amen. And so it is, amen. So once again, I want to thank you for